Welcome back to the Praxis podcast that we got going here. Coming back at you with a little bit of a question and answer session. I got a few questions queued up that I'm hoping to hear Mitchell's insight on. So honestly, I'm just going to get right into it. Mitchell, I was curious to actually, I think we should start it off with this one. It's a little more lighthearted. I think I'm going to froze up for a second. Okay, here. It's a little more lighthearted. Just been thinking about this. What would you say are some of your best habits or most effective habits for increasing your productivity?
Awesome. Well, you're getting live reactions from me today. I didn't know what questions you're bringing to the table, so I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's kick it off with that. So, two things come to mind first and foremost, and I'll say the maybe indirect answer first, which is a lot of productivity. I think is figuring out what stuff to ignore, and I think that also includes ignoring productivity hacks. I think that there are so many different systems and recommendations and gurus out there that are shilling advice about, hey, here's the things that I do. And I think that if especially if you're a young adult, young professional, and you get sucked into the Instagram reality of the advice a lot of people who are very successful are giving. They're talking about their routines. I wake up at 4 a.m. every day, and then I do a cold plunge, and then I do red light therapy, and then I meditate, and then I work out for an hour, and then I read Stoic philosophy for an hour, and then I blog for an hour. And if you can get swept away on trying to find hacks to maximize your performance, and I think really when it all comes down to it, you need to learn how to work hard before you over optimize trying to work smart. You need to establish that is honestly this a foundation of the best hack is learn how to work really, really, really hard and learn how to work so hard that you feel like you found your limit. And then from there, it's a matter of, okay, what is the infrastructure you can build around yourself to establish good daily routines, good habits, good practices that set you up for maximum probability that you're going to be able to do your best work. And I don't think that always means that every day you're operating at 110% because it's just unsustainable over time. But how can you consistently be delivering really good work? So a few of the quick, easy ones, you need to work hard. You need to learn what a good standard of work is. But actual habits, you should try and get a normal amount of sleep. You should not neglect your diet and exercise and your health and wellness. Those are definitely things that are important. When it comes down to the day-to-day operation, you need to get really good at time management and not just, hey, I have all of these things that I need to get done, and I have this much time on my calendar over the next few days, and I need to schedule those out, and I need to get them done. But I think a really, really effective, this is a super skill, and it's one that I think it's hard to develop, is the better you can get at understanding or predicting how long something should take to get done and do it at a high level, the more effective you're going to be at not just managing your time and schedule, but the more effective you're going to be at massive, high quality work output. Because you can just better ruthlessly prioritize everything. If you know this is a task that's going to take, 3 hours, and you're able to actually do it in 3 hours, as opposed to, I think a mistake a lot of people make early on is, you think something's going to take 3 hours, it actually takes 10. And now you've thrown your entire week, off schedule, and you're stressed. That's probably one of the best things you can do. And that's not something that you're going to just learn. You can't read a book. There are different strategies and things for learning how to time box and time block, and there's different names for it. But at the end of the day, reps and experience are the way that you get better at that. And I think the better you can be at reflection and documenting, hey, I'm tracking my time on specific tasks, like the more comfortable you'll get with estimating your time inputs required to deliver high quality work. And that's honestly that's one of the things that, you know, it took me quite a few years into my career to go from like being really bad at it to kind of mediocre to like really really good at it. And it's something that I'm like consistently still trying to improve on to this day. Is like I want to be better at understanding and predicting, here's about how much time, because that's kind of the basis of being able to manage your calendar, is especially if you're doing a lot of project work, as opposed to like fixed time, like fixed calls or things like that. So those are a few thoughts right off the top of the old noggin.
Another layer to that, a couple things you said there. There's a level of, you can't overcomplicate it. Like when you kind of talk about like the gurus and like the experts, like the, you know, Instagram, TikTok, like here's how you can unlock, you know, another 2 hours, and you're like, it's not that it's all wrong. I mean, a lot of it may actually work in some ways, but it's kind of like if you overcomplicate it, overthink it, you're just going to be in a cycle of never getting anything done. And it's kind of like once you just discover something that works, just stick to that. It's kind of like working out. There's a lot of different workout regimens that work. Like you'll see gains, reach a goal, but you just have to choose one and stick to it consistently. And just like you said, get the reps doing it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing there, right? Like just find something that works and stick to it, and analyze it and constantly like, okay, A/B test it. Like, is this working? Like look back and make sure that it's actually getting you where you want to go.
Yeah. One other thing that I'll add to it that kind of came to mind. So like in your path to try and develop mastery over like being able to manage your time and inputs and be able to predict that better, one of the things that I would recommend, especially if you're early in your career, is be deliberate about working backwards from deadlines. The earlier you can get started on work, the better you can get at meeting deadlines. And so here's how I think about it, because this kind of leads in the idea of productivity is, you know, it's not just the work you get done, but it's the value of the work you're doing and how other people are responding to what you're creating and their impression of you and the social capital you're building while you're doing work. And so like, this is an easy hack. Your first, 3 to 5 years in your career, you want to start building a ton of social capital with your peers, colleagues, bosses. Anytime there's a deadline, start as soon as you can and beat that deadline as quickly as you can, and treat what you're submitting, like your project or your work or output for that, what you're treat it as a first draft, and treat the actual deadline as the date that the final draft is due. And if you can always be consistently like a week ahead of deadlines, like one, it gives you time to go do your work over again if it's not great, if you need to make a bunch of edits or redo something. People are going to be impressed because you're getting stuff done way in advance, but it's going to prevent you from getting to a situation where you've blocked off a specific amount of time. Maybe you've procrastinated or you got busy and you've punted off a project that you thought was going to take 3 hours. And now you're butting up against a deadline. It's going to take 8 or 10 hours and you don't have the time to put, to create really high quality work. And then you're hitting a deadline with subpar work. And instead of, you've missed out on an opportunity to build awesome social capital, because now people are like, this person's work quality is not that great. They got it done on time, but it's not great. When instead you can be the person that got something done early and your work quality is getting better over and over.
No, that's a really solid point. I feel like that's just a principle that should apply there. Kind of switching gears a little bit, but sort of similar. Basically, a lot of people that'll listen to this they're going to be coming here because they're building their career, or they're either trying to break into that first career job, or they're in their first job and just trying to develop and continue to grow. A lot of the advice you might find out there sometimes might be a little bit dated, or not just dated, but like what worked, I don't know, 5 years ago might not work today because markets change and you have to adapt. So what would you say are a couple of the differences, just off the top of your head, between the job market, let's say 5 years ago, 2019, just before COVID, versus now? Because it's probably a good contrast of shift.
Yeah. So one of the first things that comes to mind is the explosion of, social acceptability of remote work. Pre-COVID, remote work was still popular, still on the rise, but there's nothing like what we saw sort of in the immediate aftermath of COVID of, millions and millions of jobs went online that weren't previously online. And maybe it was jobs that could be done online, but there was kind of this in-person office component. Now, a lot of people have pulled back, and a lot of people, companies, they want that office culture back. They want the productivity that they've seen from offices, but a lot of people aren't going back. So what does that mean? I think it means at least two immediately obvious things to me about the landscape today versus 5 years ago. Is one, for remote jobs, are no longer competing with, just the people in your local job market. The global marketplace is now what you're up against. You need to take it seriously when it comes to standing out. You can't just do the same old, simple LinkedIn easy apply, Indeed one click. Not that ever really was effective, but you are now competing a bunch against a much broader marketplace. A lot of people who are willing to work harder than you, cheaper than you. They may have more experience or skill than you. So it's on you to figure out how to differentiate yourself to be a really strong candidate. The flip side of that is for people who are willing to work in person, that can be a strong differentiator, especially if it's a company that wants, they want to bring people back in. Maybe they still have a bunch of holdovers of people who are like, I'm not coming back to the office. You gave us remote work. I'm not coming back. Maybe they want to start building out their office. I think that there are a lot of people who probably don't want to go back to working in an office. And so if you can demonstrate your willingness to not just show up and work really hard, but you're willing to relocate, you're willing to go in person and show up and be part of that, there are going to be opportunities that you're going to be a better candidate for based on that willingness, because, some of those candidates are no longer in the hunt for those roles.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody, I guess, what would you say to somebody who, okay, they got their first job, but their first job's a remote job? And the reason I'll preface it with, a lot of times when you're in a new environment, especially like a new job, if you're in an office or, not necessarily an office, but you're in a physical workplace, there's a pressure to not just perform, but a pressure to okay, I want to have a certain level of, I want to carry myself a certain way. I want to work well enough. I feel like people could easily fall into the trap of, oh, I have a remote job, so I can cut corners. Maybe they won't tell themselves that, but they will. So what do you say to the person that has good intentions? Not like they're thinking that, but they're how do I combat the temptation of, oh, well, I could shave off a couple minutes here, or I could do this here to cut corners. I guess, what's the advice, I guess, to put that kind of, that protection in place, just so you don't fall into that trap?
Yeah. So think about your first few jobs or first couple years in jobs as it's an extended audition. And this can be, your first couple jobs can be a strong foundation or a launch pad for the rest of your career. They can be something that, you can be that first round draft pick that just whose career never really takes off because you don't make the most of the opportunities when you get put in the game. I've seen that story play out multiple times. So when you're working in an office, I think it's important to understand the social dynamics at play. When you're working in person and there's an expectation that you're at a job or you're at your office, let's call it the traditional 9 to 5. The expectation is people are at their desks at 9, they maybe take a lunch break, and they're leaving at 5. When you're working in person, one of the easiest things you can do to make people think more highly of you, even if your work quality sucks, is them seeing you physically. You're showing up early. You're at the desk at 7:30. You're working on stuff. You're working hard. you're staying later than everybody. Like that's one of the easiest things. You lose that when you work remotely. Um, it shifts from your physical presence and people seeing you to your work output. Like that's your results are so much more on display when you're working remotely, because that's really all people have to judge you by is your work output and your communication. If you really want to be able to still put yourself in a strong position, I mean, I think there's argument to be made. Like maybe you should go seek out those in-person opportunities earlier in your career, because you're going to learn so much more being right in the action next to other people. Where you can just turn around and have a question, get help on a problem. That's not saying remote opportunities aren't great, but there are a lot more hurdles to overcome. The first one is just transaction cost of communication. You do not want to increase the communication overhead, but at the same time, you want to make it as easy as possible to not to be seen and heard just to get brownie points, but you want to make it as easy as possible to manage you and to demonstrate the value that you're creating for the team. So a couple easy things. One, send your manager or team or both an update every single morning. Here's all the things that are on my to-do list, what I'm going to get done today. Send them a sign off at the end of the day. Hey, here's everything that I got done. Here's what I'm going to tackle first thing. At the end of the week, send a big roundup. Here's everything that I got done. Here's what I'm going to jump on next week. Don't be the person that's pestering your peers or boss with just questions that you haven't really investigated. That's not to say don't ask questions, but you need to be a little bit more self-sufficient as a remote employee. So like try and find the answers to your question, try and find solutions to your problem, try and be the person who can, you've come to the table, not just with a harebrained idea, but like a little bit, at least a halfway formed idea of like, hey, here's a problem I identified. Here's what I think some of the things that we can do to address it. Here's some of the things I already began to look into and test. Here's what I think it's going to take to get this done. Here's what I think it's going to cost. Here's whose time I think it's going to take. Would you like me to handle this? Take those projects as far as you can, before you need to ask permission. And generally be a good peer. Any way that you can like begin to forge those relationships with your peers. It is isolating. But if you can like be somebody who's, sunny and chipper and like, I don't know, simple things when you're working remote, like, hey, what's everybody listening to today? I'm going to drop some, here are the beats I'm listening to. I'm working on projects. Like there are little things that you can do to begin to overcome the isolation and build those relationships. And like you're not just all people working at your houses who like happen to log on during the day, but you're like actually building relationships and friendships. All of those things I think are so much more important when you remove the in-person component, not just for, being effective in your job, but like overcoming the visibility benefit you have from being in person. And I think that you'll be someone that people begin to trust and think highly of if you're managing up like that with your communication and just like on top of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have a strong why, like and know your why. Like, why am I doing everything I'm doing, especially in an environment like that? Because if you don't have a reason for doing the things you're doing during the day, particularly in a remote job, like you could so easily just get distracted, fall into the trap of like, oh, I guess I'll just do that later. Like, so like on top of like I mean, you probably get this too. Like as a dad, it's my my fan, like Emma and Lucas are my why. Like it's constant. Like, okay, like that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I want to get this. Or if you're like super, if you're single early in your career, like I want to build a cool career. I want to be excited about what I'm doing. And if you're in a remote setting, but that's your why, I think you can maintain that kind of that work ethic. And then what you're saying is so key. You have to be very intentional about the relationship aspect, because you're not in person. You're not actually physically with people. So like that would happen mostly naturally. Just as humans interact with each other, it just happens where you're going to develop some level of a relationship. So you have to be intentional about doing that in a remote setting. So it's different, but yeah, that's definitely pretty, that's super important to do when you're in that position.
Yeah, last point I'll add here is like kind of to the effect of knowing your why is like having a really clear understanding of your roles, responsibilities, the scope of your job, what metrics are you responsible for. Um, Sometimes if you're in a role where there's not a clearly defined description of here's what you're supposed to do in this job, especially remote, especially early in your career, before you have a ton of experience and context, that's a trap. You need to sit down and have a discussion with your team or your boss or whatever as quickly as you can. Be like, hey, listen, I wanna crush it. I want to understand what I'm responsible for. I want to understand what success looks like in this role. I want to understand all the expectations of me so I can over deliver for them. Right now, I feel like there's a little bit of ambiguity about the different things that you want me to cover. I want to make sure I cover those so that I have opportunities to be even more valuable. But right now, with this ambiguity, it's making it a little bit more difficult for me to prioritize and figure out what I should do and when I should do it and what all I should jump on and like have those conversations. That's you open dialogue like that, you're going to build some social capital, but you're probably going to get a lot of useful information
Yeah.
that can, set you up for success too.
No, that's great too. I have this kind of, it's pivoting, but it's along the same lines of just like personal development. You shared this one. And I think it's really interesting. I don't have an answer to it for myself. I'm really curious to hear your answer though about how much money in terms of net worth would you personally need to feel wealthy? Because I think there's got to be a lot to that, but I'd be very curious to hear what your thought process is there.
Yeah. So one of my favorite definitions of wealth, this comes from Robert Kiyosaki, and I don't remember if this is Rich Dad Poor Dad or one of the Rich Dad books, but he's like basically wealth is how long you could survive without needing to work to make money. And so that's really kind of the starting point when I think about, what point would I feel wealthy? It's like probably being able to just, I don't think it's necessarily being able to just stop working forever. First of all, that sounds terrible. It sounds like my personal hell is like, I don't have any purpose in life. I don't have anything to do, spend my time on. I feel like I'm being valuable to other people. But there is a function of relieving the pressure, relieving this felt pressure of needing to work to make a living. And so a question I ask myself regularly, this is like one of my, every year, every couple of years, when I'm doing my like goal setting and reflection for a year, I like to ask myself this question is like, how many of the things that I'm doing today would I still do if they weren't for money? Or how many of the things that I do today am I doing only because of the monetary gain, the income, the potential income? And I think that's a really good it's a really good litmus test as you think about your relationship with wealth and the need for wealth and the desire for it. For me, I want to do cool stuff. I want to be able to work with people that I like working with, that energize me, that are also on fire for their lives. I want to be able to make a difference and be massively valuable to the people I serve through my work. I want to build something awesome, and lasting that's valuable. I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to leave an awesome legacy for my family and grandkids if I'm lucky to have them. And like, I want to set my family up for success. I want to be able to be involved in my church and community, and that's not just with my money, but time. And so there's all those different dimensions of wealth. I think the tendency is to think about it just in terms of dollar figures. And the way you pose the question, I'll stop rambling. I'll give you the actual brass tacks for myself. Is it's probably somewhere in the $2 to probably $5 million range of like liquid net worth, where I begin to feel the level of security, where I'm probably thinking about how I'm spending my time, like in a dramatic difference. Mm-hmm. I mean, just throwing that into, even a high yield savings account right now, which is not where I put it, but like even be able to just like put that money to work would generate, more than enough income to cover all of my wives and my living expenses. My wife would probably stop working at that point, even though she enjoys her career. That wouldn't be like, I don't think that I would. I think I'd still feel like I hadn't made it yet, though.
Yeah.
For me, it probably starts to get like, I feel actually wealthy in this world between like $10 and $50 million. And I don't necessarily think that that's probably like all has to be liquid, but like I'm generating enough investment income. I own enough assets where I feel like I am impervious to things that could come after me. Not only are my needs met, but I have a massive gap between my needs and where I'm at. And I would want that to be a blessing to other people. It's like the more money you make, the more impact you can have.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of how I think about it. But at the end of the day, like with inflation running rampant, with taxes inevitably inclining for the rest of my adult life, with like this air of economic instability, this kind of in air right now, like I would say that number is just going to continue to go up, not just for me, but probably for the average person. And so I don't really know if there's a number that I would feel secure at, but I know that like obviously the higher that it is, like hopefully your relationship with money is such that there is some point where you feel like you have enough and you can make sure you're prioritizing things that are most important to you.
Yeah. No, I had no idea what you'd say, so that was pretty interesting to hear. I literally would have to sit down and like actually like ponder this further to even know where I'd need to be. Since we're talking about money, I'm curious, what would you say is the best like early stage career? That's where you're at in life. What are the best places? Where should you be putting your money? What does investing look like for you at that point? Like, if you could go back, what would you say? Okay, and not just like, oh well, like I should have bought some GameStop stock, or like, oh man, I should have kept my Bitcoin. But like, if you could go back practically, not just like you know this now because it's the future, but like if you could go back just like as far as just wisdom goes, what investment strategies would you recommend, either to yourself or just to anybody in that position?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll keep it simple, even without talking about like specific investment vehicles or asset classes or things like that. A few simple things that I wish, knowing what I know now, that I'd go back and do is like, I feel like I did really good investing in myself, which is the first thing I'd tell people, especially if they're young, is like, that's the most important investment you can make, is invest in yourself so that your future earning capacity is higher than it is today. That means building a tangible skill set that's in demand. Figuring out the kinds of problems you care about solving, you're good at solving, that other people want to pay you to solve. Build your network. Go to conferences, go to events, go meet people, go expand the surface area of luck in your life by doing those things and getting awesome work experience, working with other people who are competent and better than you that can act as mentors and pour out into you so that your growth curve is going like this. And I don't just mean like your ability and skill set, but like your earning capacity tends to follow in leap step with your skills, the value you can create, the experience you have, all of that kind of stuff. So like the earlier you prioritize that, the more margin you have for making stupid mistakes with your money, like not doing the right things early on. And you can almost make up for that later on if you go from making $30,000-$40,000 early on in your career to being making $200,000-$300,000 by the time you're leaving your 20s. Like, you can overcome a lot of mistakes quickly, especially if you keep your cost of living low. So I felt like I over-indexed on investing in myself. The things that I would go back and tell myself is like, just get a little bit better at developing good habits around money. So just save a little bit of money every month. Even if it's not a consistent amount, like consistently save a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Put it in a savings account. If you don't have anywhere better to put it, like at least have some nest egg that you're adding to over time. And I really, nest egg is the wrong word. I like to think about it as an opportunity fund. I think the idea of saving money is kind of boring and lame, and people want to go buy, dank memes and like the crypto and all the sexy investments. But at the end of the day, like, what's most important is you're building a strong foundation. An opportunity fund, the way I like to think about saving money is like you are preserving your option to say yes to opportunities you don't know about yet. If you're always spending your money, you don't have any kind of reserves built, like that cool opportunity may come along and you have to turn it down because you can't afford it, or your natural inclination is to say no to it rather than yes because you're stressed about how it might work out financially. Like, say you get an awesome opportunity, once in a lifetime chance to move across the country and go apprentice somebody or intern for somebody, but it's like unpaid, or the pay is really low and the cost of living in that city is high, and you don't have a reserve built because you've not done anything productive with your money up to that point. It's going to be a lot more difficult and stressful to say yes to that. Flip that on its head. It's a lot easier decision to say yes if you have a pretty, a nice reserve set aside. One other point that I'll make here that I cannot overemphasize this enough. I fortunately, whether through dumb luck or just happenstance, am proud of myself on this one, just because I didn't understand it yet. But like, avoid debt. Avoid any type of consumer debt in particular. Either don't get a credit card or be very, very smart with your use of credit. Don't go buy a brand new truck. Like, don't go get a massive car payment.
Yeah.
You don't need all of this stuff. If you can keep your cost of living lower than your income and totally avoid debt, you're going to be already in a much better spot than the average adult. So those are some of the probably first things.
Okay. No, those are good. That brought to mind a question though. What if you don't get a credit card, for instance? And this is just like pure thought. How important is it to be building credit? And then what are the other ways to build credit? Is a credit card even a super effective way to build your credit? Do you think if you don't do that, like, it won't really matter, because if you have no debt and then a record of having no debt, like, that'll bode well for you. Like, let's say, like, and this is a whole other conversation, I guess, but like, let's say you get to, like, you're just at a point where you want to buy a house and you're going to get a mortgage. Like, what's the alternative? Or is there what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, well, for a house, you don't need a credit score to buy a house. I think that's the natural, the common understanding is that, like, building your credit score is really, really important. And so I want to caveat this by saying having a really strong credit score can make access to credit in the future easier and more accessible. And that's basically what your credit score is it's kind of this moving rating of your past self's management of debt. Like, how good are you at managing how much debt over how much time? Basically, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah. And so a credit card can be a way to do that. There are other ways, but like, let's talk about the no credit score path. So there's a thing called manual underwriting. The disciples of Dave Ramsey will be very familiar with manual underwriting and the idea of, like, not having a credit score. It's going to be a more invasive process. I mean, getting a mortgage is already an invasive process, so you're kind of going down the same straight, but they're going to want other signals of your ability to pay debt. So they're going to want to know your income. They're going to want to know, they may want more records of your, may want more bank statements. They may want, more pay stubs over a longer period of time. They may want a longer list of your employment history and where you've lived and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not as familiar with, like, all the things they're going to ask for in that process, but there are ways to do that. Lenders are trying to assess you as a credit risk. What's the likelihood that this person not only pays us back, but pays us back on time or early? What is their ability and capacity for handling these payments and their debt? Do they have other outstanding obligations that may prevent them from repaying us? And so you got to answer that question. somehow. A credit score is kind of like a college degree in this sense. It's kind of like a proxy for really what they're trying to figure out. It's a shortcut in some ways. But as far as it comes to building credit, like a credit card is probably one of the most accessible ways that people can start doing it. There are student credit cards, there are secured credit cards, which is probably what I would recommend for most people if they're exploring that, is like, go get a secured credit card. You're basically making a deposit, and your credit limit is tied to that deposit. If you don't pay it back, they're going to keep your money. Like that's it. But like, set up some recurring expense on that thing. Don't use it at all other from that, like your electric bill or your phone bill or something like that. Like, that's an easy way to do it. That's, I think, relatively low risk in terms of not letting your spending get out of control. Other ways, there's a lot of innovation happening in this over the past 5 to 10 years. There are different apps and platforms where you can have your monthly rent payment like logged as part of your credit score, or your utility payments, or even your phone payments. So those are some other ways. If you have those different streams, like those different feeds, adding to your credit report, you can get added to a parent's credit card, which is like an easy hack for you to basically inherit partially inherit their credit history, at least attached to that specific card. Again, like, don't set yourself up for failure. Don't set your parents up for failure if you're going to do something like that. Car payments, if you go and get a car loan, that's going to add to your credit. If you take out any type of consumer loan, that's going to go on your credit score. You take out any kind of mortgage, it's going to go to a credit score. If you take out debt of any kind, generally it's going to go on your credit report. Sometimes not. If you're taking out like business or commercial loans, sometimes those aren't reported back. They're like, the bank is going, if you go apply for future debt, people are still going to want to see it. So it's not like they're not impacting you, but it may not feed back to the credit bureaus, but that can still, help you, help lenders evaluate you, if you're applying for credit. So those are some of the ways right off the cuff that, you can go about it. And, some of the things I wish I would have known 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about it all the time now, especially just with like life stage and figuring out, like, even my looking back is a much shorter period of time, but it's definitely like, I don't know why, like, I got that first cool job. I wasn't making that much money, but it was more money than I'd ever been making. And it was just like, yeah, cool. Like, I'm making money. So like, I don't have any financial responsibility. So like, I'm going to get a different car, and like, cause like I have some extra money, or like, I'm just going to spend whatever. And it's like, even looking back, like, even if you're just like, okay, I'm going to put away $100 this month, like in this high yield savings account. I mean, if you did that, like that's not a lot of money, but that's better than, okay, great. Like, cool. I have this money that I'm not really accounting for in my day-to-day spend. And that's something that I feel like that's one of those things that you're always told, or like you hear, but you don't actually, like, you're like, oh yeah, like eventually, but this time it's fine. Like, I don't need to save right now. It's okay. And then you get months and months and years down the line, you're like, I really wish I didn't approach it that way, because I would have had this like you said, opportunity fund that I don't have currently. And I bought those things in the short term, and I sacrificed the long-term fulfillment of, oh, cool. Now I have capital to fund because I think that's one of the other things too, is that as you develop in your career, like, you're going to get better at certain things, and you may even have like the skills and the value it takes to like what if, like, for instance, you wanted to start a business? It's like, if you had capital that you could use to start that business, the business is more likely to be successful. Like, you're probably not, like, the business is not going to be as good if you had nothing to throw at it right away. But if you have this opportunity fund that you were putting away for 2, 3, 4 years, well, you can use that to help you launch this business that you're excited about. So that's super, like, just putting away a little bit of money is super. Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the easy ways to think about it is like knowing your number, which I've talked about this before in different episodes and in some of the content. Is like knowing your number. What is it? What is the bottom dollar it takes for you to cover all of your cost of living, all of your expenses, all your financial obligations, for you to keep a roof over your head, transportation to and from work or any of the other places you need to go, like going to and from the grocery store, all of that kind of stuff. Your cost of survival, so your essentials like, feeding yourself, keeping the electric and water running at your house, and making sure that you can be healthy. Those are some of the essentials. Like, if you have those things covered, what does it actually cost you on a given month? And then forget about all the other fringe stuff you probably spend money on. If you understand that number, when it comes to thinking about your relationship with savings or investing or anything like that, is understanding, especially in the context of entrepreneurial aspirations, is understanding how many months you could go without needing an income, because you've got this reserve built up. A lot of times, if you're starting a business, whether you're freelancing, whether you're starting a legitimate business, a lot of times the most expensive input cost at the start is your income. Like, you need to eat, you need to cover your bills, you've got these financial obligations. Well, if the business isn't generating income yet, where's that money going to come from? And if you also haven't been responsible building a credit score or saving money or anything like that, like, you're not really going to be able to go to a bank with a startup idea, be like, hey, give me a loan, especially if your business isn't generating income and you're quitting a job with a stable income, you don't have savings. Like, you're SOL, as they say. Like, you that's not a viable strategy. And so sometimes if you can think about your savings or investments, all of your liquid net worth, if you will, divided by your monthly cost of living, and I don't mean the fringe stuff, like your monthly essentials, that's how many months of runway you have to go start your next thing. That's a good way to think about it, and also put some pressure on yourself to build that up.
Okay, so I think this is probably my last question, and it's not a complete curveball, but it's definitely deeper than probably anything so far. So I think it's probably a good one to finish with. We've been talking about this, both just you and I, in the Praxis community. We've been talking about it, but so you've been thinking about it. What if you could go back and have I don't know, let's just say like a 5-10 minute conversation with your 17-year-old self? This doesn't have to be like ultimate, like you're gonna decide like what like the one thing you'd say is, but if you could pick 1 or 2, 3 things that you would want to convey to your 17-year-old self, what do you think those 3 things would be?
Well, specifically what I would tell myself, and this may be a little bit different than what I tell the average 17-year-old, but something that I would tell myself is, prestige is not a worthy target to aim for. If you can get really clear about what it is you want out of life, what problems you want to solve, how you want to spend your time, the things you're good at, the things that other people find valuable, that's a better direction to aim at. That's a better target to aim at, and a better direction to head with your life and career, than attempting to make sure that all of the steps you take on your journey are impressive and impressive sounding to others and approved by others. I fell into that trap early, highly academically prestigious, like on that track, medical school, all like the academic elite path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I really struggled breaking out of that mindset for a long time, because I felt like everything was, will this look good on my resume? Will this look good on my, college applications, my medical school applications? Will this help me get my foot in the door at this, this next thing? And you forget ultimately what you're trying to accomplish, and you start evaluating your decisions through the lenses of what other people think rather than what really fires you up. So that's one thing I would tell to myself, and especially to like any other average 17-year-old academically minded student, is the prestige. It is a prestige trap. Avoid that if you can. The other thing is, like, very little of what feels totally monumental to you today actually matters in the long term. Everything feels so weighty when you're 17, 18. Everything feels like the end all be all decision. Like, it's life or death, high stakes, and like almost none of it is, you're not even going to remember a lot of it 10 years later. Some of it's not even going to matter. Some of it's going to, a few years down the road, you're going to look back and like, I was so stupid. That was not even a big deal. Everything from your relationships, that first big breakup, to you getting rejected from your first college of choice, to, you not getting picked for the, not getting asked to the prom, not getting picked for the job or the internship, or missing out on the opportunity, or getting laid off, or all of the, there's countless other probably scenarios that come to mind. All of it, especially when you're first starting out, feels so heavy. And it's often not until you have some life experience. And I don't mean to like talk down to younger people. It's not because you're young. It's just because a lot of the things you're encountering for the first time. And compared to everything you've encountered prior to this, it is maybe a really big deal. It does feel like it's monumental stuff, but you're going to do bigger and better stuff down the road. And this stuff is going to it's going to pale in comparison to the cool stuff you're going to do down the road and the awesome milestones you're going to achieve down the road. Right now it feels heavy, but like, cut yourself some slack. It's not the end of the world. You never know how your journey is going to unfold in cool, awesome, serendipitous ways if you just keep going and you don't let some of those things that feel big now derail you if they don't pan out the way that you think you are.
I think part of the reason for that has to be, at least in American culture, there's this bit of a like we kind of romanticize like teenage years, high school, right? Like it's like this, like, think about like I mean, I guess I feel like less so now, but maybe it's just because I don't watch them as much. But like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, like movies where everything was about high school and like maybe college, but like, right, it's middle school, like you make all this media for that time. And it's like, also what's interesting, I think another part of it is like that media also would always cast people older than the ages of the roles that they were playing. So if you're consuming all this stuff and like people that are in a movie that are in your shoes, your age, your social situation, but they also look older, there's this sense of just like you feel more mature is not necessarily the word, but I guess you feel more mature. So you have this sense that this is the culmination of everything, right? Like I'm making decisions now, and like this is like kind of like this is life A. After this is kind of like life B. Like I'm a teenager, like everything I'm doing now is just so important, so serious. Like sports, like that's just like, like playing sports, it's like this is it. Like this is where like this is like the best part of life. And it's just it's exactly what you're saying. Like just slow down a second. You're not going to be able to understand it now because you're not there yet, but like this is not actually as impactful as it feels right now. Like you can slow down and make a decision. And I don't know if that's completely doable, just because unless you have the experience, it's very challenging to implement it. But I think that is part of it. There's a cultural like romanticizing of that period of time in our lives.
Well, I think part of it too. So here's something I think is much bigger picture that I think is at play in our culture. Imagine there's a kid whose entire life he's been told he has a peanut allergy. If you eat a peanut, you're going to die. You have any contact with peanuts, you're going to die. The kid has never had a peanut. He doesn't know experientially that he actually has an allergy. He's just been told this entire life. Until one day, when he's 20, he has a peanut for the first time and nothing happens. And goes to the doctor, has an allergy test done, and realizes I'm not allergic to peanuts. I've just been told this my entire life. And so I've lived my entire life up to this point afraid of peanuts and like aggressively, intentionally avoiding peanuts or anything like that. That's what our culture is like with failure.
Yeah.
We are totally afraid of failure and believe we have this allergy to failure and that exposure to failure is going to kill us. When in reality, you just haven't tried it. You haven't encountered enough failure. And I'm not saying that to glorify failure. You shouldn't just like go seeking, hey, I want to fail. Nobody wants to be a failure. You want what's best for yourself. You want to be successful, but like failure is a precondition to success. You need you need to get comfortable with making mistakes and learning from them and setting hypothesis like, hey, I think this is what I want to do. And here's what I'm going to go to do it. And because I think this is going to pan out, help me get there, and try it. And it blows up in your face. You realize, oh, okay, maybe that one didn't work. I'm going to try this, or I'm going to take this different route. Like, you are going to fail. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think that our culture has aggressively tried to shelter people from failure and at the same time pretend like failure is not a part of the journey.
Yeah.
And so we're sending a lot of young adults out into the real world who've never really meaningfully interacted with failure. It's totally unfamiliar concept. That's what adds to this sense of weight that every decision is life or death, because it's like, I can't make a mistake. I don't get do-overs. If I don't get in, my life is over. Everything is riding on this one decision. It's not.
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss the target. You're not going to get the thing that you want sometimes. And you're going to have to learn how to adapt and pick yourself up by your bootstraps and like get busy heading in a new direction. And you don't actually have a peanut allergy. Like, you've just grown up thinking that this thing is going to kill you. And and I think it breeds fear, and it adds that sense of pressure that, teenagers already started a tough time, like, you're going through changes. You've got all these peers, you've got all these influences. And if you've also been sheltered from failure or sheltered from the opportunity to have agency and autonomy over your life, that's tough. That is a tough situation to come out of, but it's not the end. You can get busy trying stuff and failing. And eventually, like, if you get a little bit more acquainted, you get to know failure on a first name basis, like, a lot of that weight will disappear over time.
That's a good line. Get to know failure on a first name basis. That's really good. Well, those were the questions that I wanted to hear your take on. I think that was solid. Just to anybody watching, feel free to drop some questions in the comments of any of the videos. You could email them in. You could contact us on social media. We'd love to, kind of have a bigger pool of live questions, or not just live, but questions from an audience. We'd love to make it more relevant. But other than that, I'm all set, Mitchell.
All right, signing off until another time. Thanks for listening.